The 2024 winter fire season claimed the lives of over 30 people and thousands of hectares and livestock were destroyed. More than 2,500 firefighting teams were dispatched across the country. And according to Working on Fire, this fire season severely affected livelihoods, displacing thousands and damaging critical infrastructure. To help us fully understand the impact, I'm joined by the Managing Director of Working on Fire, Trevor Abrams, who's kindly joined us in the studio this morning. Trevor, thank you so much for joining us. A great piece that you wrote just explaining where we are at after this winter fire season. I must admit that I wasn't aware that we are dealing with different seasons of fire, and each of them have different factors that influence us. So bring us into the fact that where we stand after this winter fire season, with the fact that Mpumalanga is the province that has borne the brunt with the highest figures involving the impact of these fires.
Good morning. Yes, Mpumalanga actually had an estimate loss of 21 billion rand.
Wow.
And the provincial government declared emergency. But I think the real message is, in fact, what we're experiencing is the impact of climate change. And so we're looking at a global phenomenon of losses across the world: Canada, the US, Greece, Portugal, the Cape Verde Islands. It's all over that we're seeing this element of the impact of climate change, and it's getting much, much worse. You know?
And I suppose when you're speaking about climate change, it means things are changing, and it means that the goalposts are changing. Before, you could put your head in the block and say, okay, the winter fire season is from this month to this month, but those dates are changing and the intensity of it is changing. How do you work around that?
So a number of fire authorities have been getting together. I've just returned from a conference in Canada, a biennial conference there, and the basic message is the game has changed. So even the rules we had before can no longer apply. Scientists were saying their modeling on fires, and they've got a very sophisticated modeling in North America, cannot rely on the past data to project what's coming, in the future. And this is what we see in South Africa. We're running at about 2 degrees hotter than the global average. And the kind of fires we have, they're different. And I'll give you one anecdote. A pork fire in July in California spread 50,000 hectares in 24 hours. That's 1 football field a second. After a month, it had burnt 170,000 hectares. So that's what we experience, and that's why you see the fatalities that crop up. The nature of the fire is changing.
And when you talk about the infrastructure that was damaged, we spoke about livestock that was lost. Who are the people that are being the most affected by this?
Well, this is obviously people, when we're talking wildland fires. So those figures of 34 deaths so far this year are people affected by wildland fires, not structural fires. So obviously you're talking about peri-urban, rural communities that are most at risk. So as the wild and urban interface increases in areas like the Garden Route, those are the communities who are becoming more at risk. So like we had in Knysna in 2017, that firestorm took us completely by surprise. But that firestorm had the elements of what we're experiencing now. The first day we couldn't fly with helicopters because the wind was just too strong.
So you're dealing with a moving target because things are changing. As a layperson, I feel like things are changing far faster than I suppose we would have thought. If you think about, climate change is this thing that's happening, in the future. We may not even, it's happening right now. Right. How then does an important thing like our budget strategy need to change?
Well, it's absolutely crazy. Right now, we are actually confronted by budget cuts from the Department of Forestry and Fisheries and the Environment. So it's absolutely absurd moment to be confronting this. This is the reality of the fiscus. But what we are looking at is, in fact, appealing also to the private sector to get on board. And this is not unique. I mean, in 23, we were at Yellowknife in Northwest Territories in Canada, and we helped defend that capital of that province. 20,000 people got evacuated. Who contributed there? De Beers, because De Beers is mining there. So I think the kind of crisis which we're not getting adequate coverage of is demanding that all sectors of society come to the table.
Do you think then, I asked the question about how your budget strategy should change. Should we also then look at how strategic we are about who we ask for money?
Well, clearly the private sector needs to come to the party. We've just done with COP29 now, which has been dealing with the mitigating impacts of climate change.
They were talking about big numbers there. At what point do we know that some of that money is going to start trickling to organizations such as yourself?
Well, as we saw, it was a very challenging COP. We didn't realize the impact. I think the important thing to realize is the bulk of the problem we're sitting with now has been created elsewhere. This kind of degradation of our climate came from the industrialized countries in the first place, the UK, the US, and those countries. Of course, now the recently industrialized societies like China and India also making quite an impact. And we don't have a good track record with our coal-driven energy source. So, yes, that is a source of funding, multilateral funds that we're hoping to try and tap into. It's a challenge, it's a long process. It doesn't come on tap right away. So we do need, but one of the issues that's come out of this kind of conferences we're attending on the international platform is that we need to change community engagement with it. We can't leave it up to the firefighters. This is an effort that needs to be addressed by a broad spectrum of role players. Yes, government needs to play its role, and it has been funding the Working on Fire program for the last 21 years. But we're now starting to face a crisis that we need an innovative and change in our approach to managing this kind of disaster. And much of it must be in our preparedness in terms of trying to prepare for it, but also to reduce the risk. And there's a lot that we can do in that respect.
It sounds like it needs a multifaceted approach. There are the big conversations that need to happen in boardrooms with strategic budgeting and that kind of thing. But then also at community level, how we spread information, how we tell the stories. That's where we as the media can come in. How important is education around why this kind of thing is important? Not just, oh, but I don't live on the fire belt, I don't live up on the mountains, I don't live near sort of wide open spaces where the drought is affecting it, so why should it be important to me?
Yeah. No. So we practice integrated fire management, which starts with education. We do it in the schools, we do it in fire-prone communities. And, that has to be rolled out much more. If you look at the fires last year on Simonstown and Cork Bay, I've had ratepayers associations thinking, what can we do? And I think those are the areas that we need to be working on, and possibly with the media too, to do it. But for those who say, look, I'm not near it, these fires impact the economy broadly. It affects particularly agricultural activities, and it will impact on your pocket eventually. So it is really, the kind of impact of climate change and the kind of extreme weather is something that we have to have a whole society approach. It cannot be government.
And it needs to be a national approach.
Yeah.
I mean, you're talking about how the winter's fire season has come to an end.
Yeah.
And many people are saying, what do you mean winter fire season? The real fire season is now, it's summer. We're going to see all the stories about the fires in Cape Town, and the firefighters are going to do amazing work. And that's what we see happen every year.
Yeah.
Where do we stand now in terms of preparedness? What have we learned from the winter season that you're now going to apply going into the summer season? I believe there was a fire in Paarl just over the last 24 hours or so. Where do we stand? Well, there you go.
Chapman's Peak. No, it's burning already in the Cape. We had Hemel in Arde fire in Overberg burning already.
Sure.
So, yes, we lose sight of the winter fire season, which lost about 4 million hectares already. More than 2,000 heads of cattle. Huge economic impact, So it is the educational thing that we need to ramp up. We've been doing it at schools, as I've said, and in the communities. It should be actually on our TVs. It should be on our radios. And we do go to radio stations. We have those messages at local community level. But that's the kind of messaging in. And what we are now busy bringing in a Canadian system of the fire awareness training, fire safe. And that we're going to be targeting a range of communities, particularly those informal settlements, but as well as homeowners who are living on the, on the fringe of on the mountains, or if you look at the garden route, quite very deeply embedded in the forest areas. So there's quite a bit of work that's need to be done. And ultimately, of course, the real crunch is, where do we fund this out of?
People are watching right now. We're entering into the summer fire season. If you had one tip for people to help make you and your team's lives a little easier as we head into the summer fire season, what would that tip be?
There's two things.
Okay.
Do not have an open fire when it's hot and windy.
Oh, gosh. So Cape Town can't braai until February next year is what you're saying.
If you look at Cape St. Francis, they had a terrible fire that started from a braai. So that's the one thing, and so that's the kind of thing that we have to confront. And then the second thing, one needs to start taking some care about what's around your home. And the one area actually the most risky is what's in your gutters. Because when embers fly, they go onto your roof, trickle down to the gutters, and that's the area that you probably get your first ignition in your property. And
alien vegetation?
Alien vegetation is a huge problem. So our alien invasion eradication program has stalled. It's not operating any longer in terms of level used to in the past. And that is a major spread of.
And is that because of funding that's been taken away from it?
It's been funding issue, and it's just been cut back. And that also impacts on our water security.
Oh, what a complex issue, but thank you so much for enlightening us. Budgeting issues has had a massive impact, and there are little things that we as individuals can do just to try and make life a little bit easier for the brave men and women that work with you in working on fire. We thank you so much for your time, Trevor. Thank you so much for coming into the studio this morning. Trevor Abrams from Working on Fire. They've just finished the winter fire season as they prepare for that all-important summer fire season. So we need to really do what we can to help. We'll have more news after this. Stay with us.